The worst nightmare of any team principal is their two drivers crashing. It's a big loss of points, can be a hefty damage bill, and it hurts team morale. So why is Ferrari's team manager Mattia Binotto letting his drivers fight on track? Is Carlos Sainz really up to the challenge with Charles Leclerc? And how did teammate management lead to $1 million Ferrari fine? Stay tuned to find out. Bouncing ahead, this year, Ferrari is back in business. The bright red cars have finally found their way back onto the top of the grid, and their drivers are having a ball. Mattia Binotto has said that he knew that Ferrari had built a winning car from the first day of testing. He said that one run was enough, and both drivers smiled after jumping out of the car. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz knew that they both had a good shot at the title from the start of the season. The big problem for many of the teams was porpoising, which is an issue coming from the new design of the cars. It's when a change of air pressure running underneath the car reduces downforce and causes a bobbing motion. Mercedes are yet to fix their bouncing problem, and it has cost them dearly. They are being outperformed by their customer team McLaren and are struggling to stay in the top 10. Red Bull hasn't been immune to the bouncing either, and Helmut Marko has confirmed that the fuel failure that Verstappen suffered in Australia was actually due to the bobbing of the car. But Ferrari has so far managed to stay on top of it, even though they're still porpoising in their car. It looks like the performance isn't impacted too much. Their top speed is still higher than Red Bull's, and the first time they turned their engine up to full power wasn't until the Italian Grand Prix. Ferrari has hit a home run with their engine and aerodynamics of the car. Now they just have to worry about their drivers. If only the car could drive itself, the Ferrari kid. Charles Leclerc is a dream driver for Ferrari. He's young, marketable, has a connection to Italy, and most of all, he's a brilliant driver. The Monaco local grew up around karting and grabbed title after title on his way to Formula 1. And after just one season at Alfa Romeo, Ferrari thought that he was ready. But it's never a sure thing in Formula 1, and he would have to prove himself against a four-time world champion teammate Sebastian Vettel. Leclerc came out guns blazing and had the measure of Vettel the entire season. The following season, he tripled Vettel's points in the championship to convince even the critics that he was the real deal. From then on, Leclerc has been the #1 driver. 2022 has been no different. He still sits at the top of the Drivers' Championship above defending world champion Max Verstappen. When he battled Verstappen in Bahrain, he was always a step ahead. He would let the Red Bull overtake him into turn 1 before retaking the lead in turns 2 and 3. This was the kind of racing instinct that Ferrari have desperately needed for years. Verstappen was chewing through his tires before his car had engine problems towards the end of the race, but Leclerc never looked in serious trouble. Leclerc was edged out by Verstappen in Saudi Arabia, but in Australia, he came back twice as strong. He qualified in pole position and pulled out ahead of the pack straight away. Right now, the smart money is on Charles Leclerc to be the next world champion, and Binotto knows it. How did teammate management earn Ferrari a $1 million fine? And how could Ferrari infighting hand the championship to Verstappen? Don't go anywhere because all that is coming right up. Sainz getting jitters. Last season, Sainz actually outscored Leclerc. He scored 4 podiums while Leclerc only managed 1. The score sheet at the end of the season had Sainz just ahead of his young teammate by just 5 points. He clearly knows how to go head-to-head with Leclerc, but last year was different. Ferrari was always going to finish 3rd in the Constructors' Championship behind Mercedes and Red Bull. This year, there are the ones to beat. Carlos is finding out that it's not all smooth sailing at the top. Right after it was announced that Carlos had signed a new contract with Ferrari, he crashed out of qualifying at the Italian Grand Prix. That meant that he lined up 10th on the grid and 8 places behind his teammate. Binotto said that it was a case of Carlos learning to deal with the pressure. The boss said maybe for the first time in his career that he's got a car which is fast enough to compete for the best positions. Then, in the race on Sunday, he was involved in a collision on the first lap with Daniel Ricciardo, which ended his race early. Ricciardo pushed Sainz off the track coming into the first corner, and the Ferrari wasn't able to get the car started again. But Binotto isn't worried about Sainz finding his place in the team. He knows that he's experienced, mature, and knows how to adapt quickly. The plus side for Binotto's is that Carlos is not at the front fighting Leclerc and risking a teammate collision. But the downside is that he is not contributing as much to the Constructors' or Drivers' Championship fights. Teammates tangling could give it to Verstappen. If Sainz and Leclerc end up dueling each other, then it will be Max Verstappen profiting. He has gotten off to a bumpy start with a lack of reliability from his Red Bull and is trying to get back on track. If he's going to defend his world championship this season, you'll have to find a way to beat the Ferraris. At the moment, the man to beat is Charles Leclerc. Verstappen and Leclerc have been battling on track since they were just kids. They used to drive karts together and were already bitter rivals then. But 10 years later, and they're both sitting in F1 cars. The stakes are much higher, and there are many more things that can go wrong. Verstappen will be hoping that Sainz can catch up to his teammate and create some opportunities for stealing races. It definitely wouldn't be the first time that teammates were too busy fighting each other to win the championship. In 2007, when Lewis Hamilton was a rookie at McLaren, an intense rivalry with Fernando Alonso ended up costing the team a well-deserved title. Hamilton and Alonso were so focused on each other that they didn't consider Kimi Raikkonen, who was a Ferrari driver at the time, swooping in and collecting the trophy in the final race of the season. And further back in the 1980s, when Nelson Piquet joined Williams, he butted heads with the management because he was promised a #1 driving role. When his teammate Mansell got in the way of his victories, it made him him angry, and at the end of the season, it was McLaren driver Alain Prost who finished ahead of Mansell and Piquet by just a few points. So, looking at history, Binotto will know that it's important to keep his drivers from fighting with each other. Team orders. Ferrari has decades of experience managing their teammates, for better and for worse. In 1999, Mika Salo was ordered to let his teammate Eddie Irvine pass him to improve his place in the championship. Salo was just sitting in for Michael Schumacher, and so it wasn't a problem. But infamously, 3 years later, Rubens Barrichello was told to step aside for Schumacher to win the 2002 Austrian Grand Prix, even though Schumacher had a comfortable lead in the championship. Ferrari didn't want to take any chances. Both drivers complied with the orders, but neither of them was too pleased after the race, and it showed. An embarrassed Schumacher refused to step onto the first-place step of the podium and instead insisted that Barrichello stand there. It was a nice gesture, but turned out to be an expensive one. The FIA fined them the next day a whopping $1 million for breaking the regulations. That race also led to the ban of team orders the following season. But after several years of coded messages being sent to signal the order to drivers, team bans were allowed again. Ferrari might find themselves in a position where they have to consider team orders soon. Would Carlos move out of the way if asked to? Who do you think will come out on top between Leclerc and Sainz? And is Carlos cracking under the pressure, or has he just been unlucky? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.